Hello, everybody, and welcome back to That Amazon Ads Podcast. I'm your co-host, Andrew, here with my partner, my friend, my other co-host, Steven. How are you doing?
Colleague. Close acquaintance. Doing well, Andrew. I am for the podcast. People usually see me with glasses on, and ever since I got this like light thing, it causes a really bad glare on my glasses.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to go no glasses now, and it's kind of hard to see. But I'm getting LASIK later today, so I will permanently be a changed man, never to have glasses again.
That's going to be awesome, man. That's going to be a big quality of life improvement, right?
Yeah,
well, maybe.
Or maybe something goes wrong and I'm blind for the rest of my life. Either way, it'll be very exciting. We'll see what happens next week.
Quick question for you though on that topic. Did you decide to get LASIK specifically because of the podcast and the lighting that you have set up, or did you always want it?
I was thinking about it for a while, and that was one of the kickers because I figured it would be a business expense. Because it's pretty expensive. Yeah, it's like it's going to cost me like $6,000. So
dang,
I think it counts as a business expense if it's. I mean, for the government listening, if you ever audit me, I'm saying right here, I just said it. Why I'm getting LASIK is for the pod, for the content business.
It's worth it, man. It's worth it.
I meant to look up later. I wonder if models can use cosmetic surgery. Like, is that a write-off for all models? Like plastic surgery, whatever they get done, like, is that all business expense?
Yeah, not a model, as you can tell. But if you're a model, leave a comment.
If you're out there, if you're a model, let us know.
Yeah, definitely hit up Steven in the DMs if you're a model. But
or if you're a tax expert and you can help me evade these taxes.
There you go. Well, Steven, today we're not going to be teaching people how to commit fraud or, falsely file their taxes. Today, we're going to be talking about our top 7 favorite Excel tips and tricks, formulas specifically for Amazon PPC. I'm excited to dive in this one. You know for a fact, firsthand, how much I use Excel and how meticulous and particular I can be about Excel spreadsheets. So I'm excited to dig into this one.
You are certainly the Excel expert, so we're in good hands here. I'm pretty good myself, but I'm not nearly as in depth as you are. And if anyone's not following Andrew on LinkedIn, he made a post that went viral. It was titled like, what did you say, like my 26 formulas you need to know? What was it? What was it?
It was like 26 Excel tips and tricks you need to know if you're an Amazon PPC manager or something like that.
And then you even got a shout out from someone from Amazon, one of the guys who's like one of the seniors on the Amazon ad tech team.
Yeah, Jeffrey
mentioned you in his article.
He did. Yeah, that was awful nice of him. But again, I love Excel. I'm definitely not the most thorough expert. I can't do like macros and VBA scripts and things like that. Unfortunately, I'm still working my way there. But for most things that you need for Amazon advertising, I'm pretty well versed. So
yeah. So for everyone who's listening to this, hopefully you guys are of a similar mindset as we are, because that will make the content much more valuable to you. But we're scrappy. We use virtually no tools. We just do everything in Excel. For some particularly large accounts, we'll use some third-party software products. But otherwise, most of what we're doing, like the reports that we're generating for clients, Andrew's. I mean, maybe we could talk about Looker Studio sometime, because that's where you're really have done some really cool reporting work. But for this episode, we're just going to be talking about kind of the top 7. So we're taking Andrew's list of 26, narrowing it down to kind of just like the creme de la creme of Amazon, of Excel functions that we can do for Amazon advertising. And so, with kind of that all being set up, Andrew, why don't we just dive right in? Let's look at number 1 and see what we got.
Let's do it. For Excel tip and trick number 1, we have one that I use probably every single day, almost every single day, if not every day. And that is pivot tables. Pivot tables are a great tool within Excel. Very simple, very easy to use. The main purpose that pivot tables serve is they allow you to group all of your data based on different fields or values that you want to look up, whether that be looking at your performance across an individual search term, across your whole account. You want to see, across all of your campaigns, how much you're spending and what your ACoS is on a specific search term. Or if you want to look at what your total performance across all your campaigns for one particular product was, you can look at that, all that performance grouped by ASIN or things like that. So that's just a couple use cases to kick us off here to talk about pivot tables. But this is one, I mean, Stephen, I use this every day. What about you?
Yeah. I certainly use it pretty frequently, but yeah, I think I'm just going to backpedal really quick because I think we forgot to mention something earlier. A lot of these functions and things that we're going to be talking about, like pivot tables, obviously anybody can go Google, how to set up a pivot table or whatever in Excel. It would certainly be helpful, I'm sure, to a lot of people if you were able to kind of get an over-the-shoulder view, seeing us actually jump in and create a pivot table from a search term report or an advertised product report and show you how we can draw out some insights. So we're planning on, after this episode, releasing some videos like that. It'll be exclusively for YouTube. So if you're not subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss that. But we'll be going over a little bit more, how to, I guess, do these things. But for this episode, we're mainly talking a little more high level. But yeah, those pivot tables come in extremely handy. For me, they are most important on search term reports. And the reason why is because one of the issues with search term reports is you might have, we were talking about negative keywords and different types of criteria you'd want to look at. If there's a certain search term that's coming up in your reports that's showing you're spending, let's say $100 in spend with no sales. But if that $100 of spend is spread across for the same search term, that search term appeared in, let's just say, 100 different ad groups, and it got one click and $1 of spend on 100 different ad groups, that none of those individual search terms are necessarily going to come up in your filters when you're looking for that kind of wasted spend opportunity. So what these pivot tables are going to allow you to do is summarize by every unique search term, every unique ASIN that's coming up in your search term reports, and kind of show you the overall data for how those are performing. So can be really helpful for spotting those trends and seeing total performance on unique characters that are appearing across multiple ad groups or campaigns.
Yeah, that's a great one. Definitely love being able to see that total performance of search terms. One additional layer to that example that you just gave is like adding a filter. So this is something that you can do too with pivot tables that I do pretty frequently to help kind of narrow what I want to look at exactly. So in order to create the pivot table, first I have my raw data from my search term report. I'll go in, select all that data, go up to the insert ribbon and hit insert pivot table, put it on a new sheet. And then I can kind of create the table how I want it to look. I can say these are the rows that I want to include, and then these are the different values that I want to include. And like Steven mentioned, in the over the shoulder videos, we'll give you a real in-depth look at how all the different pieces to this puzzle, but just trying to give you a good overview of how we might use it. But then I can add filters. So let's say I want to just look at the search terms in one individual campaign, or let's say I have a ASIN field in my search term report that I created, which we'll talk about how you can do that later with some of the other functions. Maybe I want to look at all of the search terms that one individual product is delivering on. I can use that filter function to help, or that filter aspect of the pivot table to help narrow that search down and start to look at, just the performance on one product or just the search terms that are delivering for one product, things like that. There's a lot of different capabilities that you can deploy with pivot tables. Super powerful, great tool, and a ton of customization features as well.
Yep. Yeah. And we'll, a lot of these formulas that we're talking about all kind of overlap with each other. So for this episode, we'll probably point forward and point backward, but you can also use VLOOKUP, which is our next one that we're coming across. But that VLOOKUP, you can use that to kind of classify ASINs or search terms as either brand or competitor or non-brand. And then you can use those pivot tables to then sum all that data so you can actually see your splits between brand and non-brand. And, basically what these pivot tables are going to help you do is just extrapolate data. Extrapolate's a word, right?
Yeah, extrapolate, group, like
Yeah.
condense data into like specific segments that you're looking for. So, like in that example, Stephen was just talking about looking at your tactical breakouts between your different keywords and stuff. You could pull that all into a pivot table and just look at your metrics across brand, non-brand, competitor, all that. There's a
Yeah.
infinite ways you could do this. You could look at match types, like you could see your performance across match types. You could sum all that data there. But pivot tables are just a great way to aggregate all of your data, group it all in different customizable fashions, and just gives you a lot of different ways to cut and slice and dice your data so that way you can narrow it down and see exactly what it is you're trying to pull out from your performance data.
Yeah. So let's jump over, since I started teasing it, let's jump over to number 2, VLOOKUP. So VLOOKUP, or vertical lookup, is a function in Excel that essentially allows you to cross-reference data. So you can, maybe one example is, let's say you have an advertised product report and it's only showing the ASINs, but you're actually trying to get what the actual SKUs are, or perhaps you're trying to get the product titles. Andrew, I know this is one thing that you're frequently doing when you're trying to generate these advertised product reports for clients for reporting. First we'll take an advertised product report, we'll sum up all the data by all the product ads, so you have all of your ASIN totals. And now you want to plug in the titles there because no one has any of all the ASINs memorized. So you want to grab those titles. So you have a separate spreadsheet that has the ASINs with the titles that are associated with them, and you can cross-reference that on your pivot table. And so when you have all of your total ASIN performance, here's the total spend, here's the total sales for this ASIN, you can then use a VLOOKUP to pull in the titles from that other sheet. And what's really cool about that VLOOKUP function is, it doesn't even have to be on the same Excel file. You can literally pull it from any other file on your Google Drive or on your local machine if you're working off desktop. So that can be, that's probably the thing that I use most frequently out of everything that we're going to say here. VLOOKUP is probably the number one thing that I use. It can be used for pulling in campaign IDs, ad group IDs, any of those things that get really messy with when working with bulk sheets. What else, Andrew? There's so many different possibilities of what VLOOKUP can be used for.
Yeah. I'll just give an example of how I might use it in a certain scenario. I think right when I kick off working with an account or a client, one of the first things I ask for is an inventory sheet. And what an inventory sheet usually looks like is a list, this Excel sheet of all the parent ASINs, child ASINs, titles, categories, prices, different segments of however this client breaks up their catalog. I want to have a sheet that is like my master sheet for all of these different variables that I might need to know which product pairs with which category. So, say for example, I have a list of like different ASINs. I have 5 ASINs in 5 different categories in 2 different columns. I can very easily just go in, VLOOKUP off of that sheet to pull into my other data sheet. So in the example you were mentioning, we were looking at an advertised product report, and we wanted to pull in the titles. So I could pull that advertised product report, create a new column in my advertised product report sheet, and then VLOOKUP off of that inventory sheet what the category is for every single one of those ASINs. And then I could do a pivot table and I could look at the performance by category or the performance by ASIN or however I wanted to do it. Or maybe the advertised product report doesn't have the SKUs in it that I need, but my master sheet does. And I need to be reporting out by SKU because the client really prefers to just look at SKUs because they know those offhand. They can tell what the product is just by looking at it, where they can't with an ASIN. So that's just like one example of how I might be able to use that. I'll be pulling data, corresponding data based on a unique value or a unique identifier. And usually that identifier is an ASIN or a SKU, but you can do it based off of anything. You could do it based off of a search term or a campaign. It's just got to be accurate because, or it's got to be consistent because any slight variation in that unique identifier will throw off your formula. It won't pull in the cells that you're looking to pull in. So just keep that in mind. Make sure it's something that's not going to change. Like your campaign name could change, for example. Like you could have a certain set of variables that you pair to a individual campaign, but if you change the campaign name and try to VLOOKUP off of it to pull in something, it's not going to work because the campaign name has changed. So just keep that in mind. You want to, use a identifier or a variable that is fixed and can be paired to all these other variables.
Yep. Yeah, I was just as you were talking, I was remembering a client I was working with several years ago, and they wanted reporting. I think they had maybe like 20 or 25 ASINs, and those broke down into like 4 or 5 different like groups, like categories, product categories, and they wanted in their weekly reporting a readout of how each category was doing and the overall performance for each category. Now, in a perfect world, those would have just been grouped at like the campaign level, or there would have been something in the campaign names. So all I would have had to do was take those campaigns, extract out what those categories are, and then just run a pivot table on that. But there was a lot of legacy campaigns in there, and so the campaigns weren't super well organized or named, and ASINs were kind of all over the place. So what I had to do, and there's probably a faster and better way to do this, but I was still early on, and this is just what my brain thought up of, is I would take the advertised product report, create a pivot table to sum all the ASINs, VLOOKUP to assign the categories to each ASIN, and then run another pivot table to sum all the categories. So I guess in hindsight, I could have just done the VLOOKUP once from the advertised product report and just placed them there and then just summed off of that rather than trying to do it twice to sum it once and then sum it again. So yeah, that probably could have been faster, but that's just another example. And one final example for me, I just used VLOOKUP today because I was doing a round of bid optimizations for a client. I uploaded the bid optimizations. It was a total of like 5,282 optimizations, and they all went through successfully. But I noticed that a week ago, I had 5,282 optimizations that all went through successfully. And I used a different bulk file. I downloaded a different bulk file, a different date range, tweaked the bid changes I was going through. And I was like, wait, what are the chances that it was exactly the same amount of rows? Like something must have gone wrong. And so I just downloaded both of the files that Amazon was, they'll let you download the original file. So I downloaded both of those. I created a new column that was going to be like my cross-reference bid column. And I did a VLOOKUP using the product and keyword targeting IDs to look up what the bid column was for the keyword and product targeting IDs on the other sheet, and saw that they were in fact all of the exact same keywords. And then I realized my issue was that I had saved a file as a CSV, not an Excel, and that's why I ended up accidentally uploading the original. So, but point being, like, that's just like, you can really use VLOOKUPs for anything. You can use it to like, cross-reference duplicates across different sheets to pull in other type of data. So it's just, I mean, like for all of these things that we're mentioning, the possibilities are really endless. The only limit is your own kind of creativity, but we're just kind of giving some frequent use case scenarios for ourselves here.
Yeah, for sure. You can use these for a lot of different things. Sometimes using them requires a little bit of upfront work in terms of setting up something like an inventory sheet or a master sheet that holds all these different variables and data points that you are, particularly looking at on a regular basis. But all in all, these things are applicable across a lot of different use cases, which hopefully we'll dive into at another time. But for now, let's move on to number 3, the concatenate function. So the concatenate function, this is a function that allows you to take a variety of cells, a combination of different cells, and combine them. And you can use a variety of different ways of doing this, but basically just think of it as bringing a bunch of different variables or a bunch of different cells together into one cell in a format that you want. Now, the first use case, and probably the most applicable use case for this function in Amazon PPC, is for campaign naming and ad group naming. If you follow me on LinkedIn, hopefully you got the campaign naming generator and you're able to utilize that to, add some sort of systemization or standardization to your campaign naming process. But in that sheet, you can see that we take a whole bunch of different variables that are kind of defining the role and the goal and the purpose of the campaign, and then bringing it all together into one name that encompasses a variety of different variables that tell me a lot of different things, but ultimately just results in one campaign name. So use these a lot. Stephen, you've used these for sure. Can you think of anything else that we use these for? Like campaign naming, ad group naming, that's like number one thing we use concatenate for, but
yeah, it's so number one that it's difficult for me to think of anything else that these are
that's how
used.
I feel.
But yeah, you're there. We put it here because anybody who's like manually typing in these campaign names and doing one at a time and doesn't know how to concatenate is, yeah, you're wasting so much time. So this will save your life. But when we were for that one client, Andrew, we were launching. They wanted to do single product campaigns for about 800 different ASINs, and they wanted 3 campaigns for each ASIN. And we wanted to have the ASINs in the campaign titles. And so like using your sheet, it wasn't quite the exact same, but it was pretty similar. But your campaign naming generator, where like in one column we just copy and paste all the ASINs down. In the other column, we would say all of like the product categories that those are in. And the other column, we would say, we the first third would be auto, the second third would be keyword targeting, the third would be product targeting. So we're setting up all of our like the individual campaigns that we want to have, and we end up having like 10 or 12 different columns with each of the segments that we want to include there. And then in the very first column, we just concatenate everything. So we just combine all those 12 elements into one. And with this concatenate function, you can also insert little text strings. So you can separate out, when you bring these cells together, you can like add spaces in between the cells, add underscores, add vertical line separators. So yeah, I certainly do that. It's the only way, in my opinion, to launch campaigns or new ad groups. Like you want to include all that data, and anyone who's going to try to enter all that manually is just going to, imagine trying to do like 2,400 individual campaign names.
Yeah, you're definitely going to run into some mistakes there. There's going to be some human error. So like this is a whole other discussion, but having a standardized way of creating your campaign names and ad group names is absolutely huge. And if you don't currently have that, go to my LinkedIn and download the campaign naming generator template. So that'll help you out quite a bit. And actually, now that I just sat there and was listening to you for a little bit, I thought of one potential other example for using concatenate that I saw on LinkedIn. I can't remember who it was, but somebody was posting about coming up with different variations of keywords for products that were maybe different colors or different sizes or things like that. They were using concatenate to basically take a seed keyword and then pair it with a variation of that keyword. So it would have been like red tennis shoes and then like blue tennis shoes or something like that. I don't remember exactly what it was, but they were using it to generate variations of strings of keywords or search terms like that they could potentially target. And it created a whole bunch of different variants of the seed keyword that they were looking to target, just kind of branched out their overall targeting efforts and covered a lot of bases there. So that was one that just came to mind as I was sitting here.
Yeah, that's a pretty good idea. Also, with like if you had an n-gram analysis tool and it, basically identifies trends and breaks out a ton of different corresponding words, you can then like concatenate to bring those all back together again. And yeah, that's another good example of kind of helping you combine different elements into a new keyword that you want to target. So yeah, that's good. I mean, I don't think there's too much more to say with concatenate since it's important, but not too much to elaborate on there. So let's jump into our fourth favorite function, which is the text before or text after. So the text before, text after function is sort of the opposite of concatenate, where concatenate is bringing cells together. The text before, text after is going to allow you to basically strip out a portion of a cell. So, if you have a cell where like at the very, very end, you're going to say like target equals whatever. And that's like something in your campaign name. And you want to like pull out that, or maybe it's like, maybe you have a little indicator that's showing what your target ACoS is for that campaign. And so at the very end of your campaign name, you have a little identifier that says target ACoS 50%. And you just want to extract out that 50% or whatever it is, because every single campaign, some are going to be at 30, some 25, some 50. And you just want to extract out that final percentage figure. You can use that text before, text after. You can also use left or right function. These are very similar, I guess, in use case, but text before or after gives you a little bit more variety there. But you can extract out pieces of a cell that you can then use when you're trying to do multiply math problems against different percentages or I mean, yeah, there's you could be pulling out categories, pulling out ASINs, basically whatever you've designed and you've built into your campaigns and ad group names, you can, extract those out with this function.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good one. As I was thinking about this one, you can kind of use if you have a good inventory sheet or a good campaign naming system, you can use that to like VLOOKUP all the variables that are going into your campaign name. And so, and most of the time, what I'm using this text before, text after, or left, right, is to pull something out of the campaign name. And just for like speed, sometimes it makes more sense to just use a quick function like this, like a left, right, or before or after, as opposed to going and opening up your inventory sheet or finding it and then opening it and then having to do the VLOOKUP. Sometimes it's just better if you just want to stay in that same sheet and not have to go through the little extra effort to find your other file. You can use one of these functions to kind of speed that up a little bit, or it's just another way of doing things. But a lot of the things that you mentioned are direct use cases. So if you have your target ACOS or you have your ASIN in the back half or the end of your campaign name, let's say for example, you have like the category name underscore ASIN are like the last sections of your campaign name. You could do text after, and then the text you would be looking at would be like the underscore. So you'd be like, pull everything after the underscore, or you could say text before underscore B0. So then you could pull everything that comes before the B0 in the campaign name. And that's just like the main use case for it that I would use is just trying to extract some different variables out of my campaign name or my ad group name. So for how we do our ad group naming, we'll have our ASIN underscore title. So I could say text before underscore, or I could do left 10 characters or something like that.
You want to be a little careful with that, right? Because if you have multiple underscores.
Yeah. So yeah, you would have to be like more meticulous about how you would input that. Like, so let's say you have your full campaign name and then you have the category underscore B0. If you just did text before underscore B0, it's going to pull in everything before the B0 in your campaign name. So it's not just going to pull in that categories. But what you could do after that is you could do a text after or a text after function that basically now, after you've pulled out everything before the ASIN, now you're left with a category at the end, right? And so you could just do a text after the underscore, and then you'd have your category. So you could just do like two text functions and get to pulling out the category. That's just like kind of a roundabout way of doing it. But yeah, it's important to keep in mind that everything that you say, like everything before the delimiter or the character that you're selecting or phrase or whatever it is, everything before that is going to get pulled in. So you may have to do two to get to what you're actually looking for, or use the VLOOKUP off of your inventory sheet, or there's a variety of different ways that you could use that.
Yeah. So if you're just trying to take something from your campaign that's just at the beginning or the end of that campaign, like if you have like your ASINs are all at the beginning of the campaign, you can just use the left function. So the left is just going to pull like the first characters from the left. So like Andrew, you mentioned, like you could just say left 10, which would just mean like the first 10 characters from the left. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say the only caveat to that is if you're doing that, you just need to make sure that everything's consistent down through all of your rows.
Right.
So if you're pulling the ASIN, it's always 10 characters. So you know that if you're using a left function and you look at the first 10 characters, it's only going to pull the first 10, and it's always going to be the full ASIN because they're always 10 characters. Right. But if you have like a target ACOS and one of them's 5% and one of them's 30, if you just do, pull the two characters or one character to get the target ACOS or whatever out of your campaign into its own cell, then in some of them, it's only going to pull 5 or it's only going to pull 0 instead of 30. It'll pull the last character at the end of the campaign name. So you just got to make sure that whatever it is you're pulling out is a consistent number of characters. And that's a reason why the text before, text after might actually be a better use case. So, for example, for the target ACoS, if you have one that's like dash space 5 for 5% ACoS and dash space 30, you could do text after dash space, and then that would pull in your target ACoS across the board for all of your rows, as long as it, of course, has it in the name. But that would kind of prevent you from running into any issues with, variation in the number of characters there.
Yep, that was a great clarifier. Yeah, so if you are only, if it works for you where whatever you're trying to extract from a campaign, whether it's the ASIN or it's the target ACoS or whatever, and it's going to be the same number of characters because like all of your target ACoSs in your campaigns are no more than 2 digits, or if you do have a 5% or you did like 0.5 or something like that, then you can use right or left to just pull out that section. But text before, text after is going to basically just get you a little more granular. So sometimes you can just use right or left if it's convenient, but text before, text after is going to get you a lot further. And there are some more advanced stuff. I believe there's ways where you can look specifically for a character in the cell and then take like the 10 middle characters or something like that. But we're trying to limit this to just the top 7. So we're taking it with the ones that we found the most value in. So anything else to add there, Andrew?
Nope. I think that's it. Text before, text after, good use case. Left, right functions, great use case. Find the right horse for the right course and use those Excel functions.
Horses and courses. What a throwback.
That's right. All right, let's move on to number 5, where we have if and or statements. So if statements are a function that we use quite a bit. Basically allows you to implement some sort a bit of a layered logic to getting information from your different data sheets. So we use this in a few different ways. Stephen, I have used this a lot in the tool that you were using to kind of break out the performance of placements in a bulk sheet. You want to walk through how we use that just to give everybody like a real good use case for this? Because I think this is like one of the big ones that comes to mind.
Yeah, so multi-layered logic. So I mean, there's a really easy thing where you can just say, hey, if ACoS is greater than this percent, then like highlight it in red, or like say high ACoS or something like that. And like you can just do that really easily and just print a column that says high ACoS, whatever, and filter out. So that's like the most basic version of these if statements. But things can get more complicated where you're looking for multiple conditions or alternative conditions. And that's where you get introduced, where you can also include those and statements or those or statements. So one example of the example Andrew was mentioning, when we calculate the placement settings for our campaigns, that is, how do we increase the placements for top of search versus how much do we increase the placements for product pages. We're planning on doing an episode on that in more detail coming up. So stay tuned. Again, subscribe so you don't miss out the actual math behind that. But one thing that's very important to note is the way the math works out is you're going to increase the top of search percentage by a certain amount if product pages is performing better than rest of search. If product pages is performing worse than rest of search placements, then we have to change the calculation for those top of search placements. And so don't get too caught up there. Like, again, we'll do an episode on that in particular, but that's a good example of like where that if statement came in, because we had 2 different conditions where it's like, if product pages performs better than rest of search, then we're going to calculate top search this way. But if it doesn't, then we're going to calculate it this way. And then same thing, like you're only going to increase your placements on product pages if it's outperforming rest of search and everything like that. If it's not, then you're not going to want to increase on the product pages. So you would say like, if yes, then calculate this formula. If not, then just set it to 0%. So we're not going to be increasing on product pages. But that's something, I mean, yeah, where that can take you. I mean, if you're creative and, things can definitely get a little bit complicated when you start adding in many, many layers and you start adding in a lot of conditionals and a lot of ands and a lot of ors. Things get really complex, but you can do some really incredible stuff with it. So, yeah, I mean, I guess for all of these things, the only limitation is your creativity and your ability to problem solve and, think through some things. So, well, I'd certainly love to hear what other people have used for these, for for any of these formulas or for the if statements in particular, like what kind of logic you've been able to do. Andrew, what other types of logics have you been including with your if statements?
Yeah. This honestly is one that I don't use like a ton. I'm not like super advanced in building extremely long formulas with a bunch of different layered logic incorporated into them. I use them for like pretty simple stuff for the most part. If I'm like, I used my text after to look up the campaign target ACOS in my bulk sheet, and then I want to just like label in another column whether that keyword is meeting target ACOS or not. So that way I can filter out everything that is not meeting my target ACOS. I can make adjustments to those types of things. That's the type of stuff I'm using it for. So
Yeah.
I don't know that I'm like the most advanced person.
So
I know
well,
you're way more advanced at this with some of the stuff you were doing, building some cool sheets and stuff. But go ahead.
Yeah. And even frankly, like that little Excel macro thing was pretty simple. It was really only like
Yeah.
2 layers of logic there. We did do, we realized that could be a lot better. And so we've been working with like some developers to help us build a better version of that tool. And what I delivered to them was, because I didn't know how this was beyond what I would be able to ever program in Excel, but I gave them a 6-page document. It was a Google Doc that was like if this and if this, or if this and if this, just 6 pages of if this then that logic with like all these different layers and everything. So, but they delivered and it works. So it's certainly, I'm really stoked that we have a better bidding kind of optimizer now. But what I was going to say to kind of bring it back to reality where most people are is you could use this. You could combine a couple things here. So let's just say you take your a targeting report, or you're using a bulk download, and you have all of your targets filtered out. So you're only looking at your targeting, whether it's keyword targeting, product targeting, whatever. You add a new column that's going to be your brand or non-brand classifier. And so then you're going to use that VLOOKUP tool that we already talked about, and you're going to cross-reference another sheet that's going to, you've kind of previously classified what would be something that is brand or non-brand. And so you VLOOKUP all that data back in. And then you can now do a multi-layered if-then logic where you say, if this keyword is a brand and ACOS is over this percent, then you can print a high ACOS keyword or high, or your brand keyword is above your target ACOS. And then, or if it's not doing, if it's not a branded keyword, then your ACOS would, maybe you want to have a little bit of a higher threshold if it's like a special type of keyword, or maybe it's one of your like VIP keywords or whatever. So if you have different keyword categories, maybe your target ACOS for those is a little bit different. And so you can use that logic. So you're only identifying all of the high ACOS keywords according to what your target ACOS is for those different keyword types, whether it's brand or non-brand or conquest, et cetera. So that's just an example that came to mind. Do with it what you will.
Yeah, I love these if statements. They're super complicated. Sometimes you can use them for a lot of different things, a lot of different use cases. Would love to hear some of the different ways you've been able to utilize them in your Amazon ad management practice. So leave us a comment if you have any unique ways you're using if and or statements. But for now, let's move on to number 6, conditional formatting.
So conditional formatting is, the last like 4 functions we mentioned, those are all very practical things that are going to like speed up your workflow, allow you to do more advanced optimizations and all this types of practical, I guess, like functional kind of performance. When it comes to conditional formatting, this isn't anything that's going to actually like, you're not going to be making any like performance changes from this. Like you're not able to really execute any changes in your Excel file, but it's just an extremely helpful visual tool. And pretty much all of these, whether it's Google Sheets or Excel, they all have this conditional formatting built in there, but you can basically create a color scale over your whatever column you want. So I'm trying to think of one thing that we use this for a lot is DSP creatives. So DSP creatives are really difficult to analyze the performance on them, because on the one hand, you're looking at ROAS. If something has a really high ROAS or really low ACOS, that's going to be like, a top performer. But on the other hand, that's not the only way we manage DSP. These display ads, a lot of times what we're trying to do is just drive awareness. and drive as much traffic as we can, because we're just trying to like get people to start considering our products, and not necessarily, we're not so focused on closing the sale at this stage of the funnel. And so we also want to be looking at click-through rates and seeing how much of this, how good of a job are these creatives doing? How engaging are they? Like the click-through rates on creatives, like custom creatives, I think are way more important than they are on just say a sponsored product ad. Because I mean, your click-through rate on a DSP creative can wildly swing depending on how eye-catching that creative is, and especially if you're only paying, if you're paying by the impression and you're not paying by the click on these display ads, then the more clicks you can get, the better, because it's not actually costing you more money. So the higher your click-through rate, you're just driving cheaper traffic to your product pages. So optimizing towards click-through rate is really important, but you also want to be optimizing towards ROAS, because that's going to give you a better idea of like, are you hitting the right audience that this audience is ending up selling? And then your click-through rate is going to be telling you how strong is this creative performing. And then you might also want to look at the conversion rate or whatever. All this to be said, what we do is we do a conditional formatting for all of our creatives, where we apply color scale across click-through rate, conversion rate, purchase rate, ROAS. I think those are the main ones that we look at. There might be some other ones that I'm forgetting. But when we see that color coding across all of those items, each of those columns is going to be ranging from red to green, and like in the middle would be like yellow. And we can now see where like green is the best performer, red is the worst performer, and yellow is around average. You can also kind of adjust those. You can fine tune that color coding where maybe you just want the yellow to be at the 0 point mark or whatever. So you'll see when we do the more in-depth video on this. But why I love that is I can now identify across several columns where does there seem to be a little bit of like a green cluster clump, where on average, this one seems to have like, if there's a green cluster clump, that means it's on the higher end of performance on click-through rate and conversion rate and ROAS. Or maybe you're also looking at like cost per click or cost per thousand impressions. Any of these metrics, if you color code all of them, there might be something that has an extremely high ROAS, but a horrible click-through rate, like 0.01% click-through rate, and the ROAS is just really high. And so that's not necessarily something you want to put a bunch more spend in. You want to find something that's doing well across the board, across all of your KPIs. And so for me, that's one probably most useful example to me personally, is trying to get a visual on where is the best performance across multiple KPIs, and those color codes really come in super handy. So that might have been a little bit esoteric for some people, for those who aren't super involved on the display side of things, but still, I mean, you're doing sponsored display, and you can apply that same logic to sponsored products and brands as well. So
yeah, for sure. I mean, imagine even if you're not doing display, you could do that same practice across your search campaigns or your search keywords, and you want to find different correlations between different metrics. Conditional formatting is really just like as a visual tool that allows you to be able to extract trends, or just see on a color scale, which is much more easy to recognize and spot correlations and trends in, than it is to just look at a Excel sheet full of numbers and try to like pick out the correlations. It's much easier if you just have that color coding in there. It just allows you to just pinpoint those different key pockets of where things are good or where things are, not looking so good. I love it. I like how customizable these conditional formatting rules are as well. The color scale example you mentioned is great for just like applying down through the column, or you could even do like through the row. I've done it where I was really interested in looking at the search frequency rank over time across a variety of terms, and I basically did that. I had the search term in the far left column, and then each other column after that was a new month or like a new week, and then it would give me the search frequency rank each week for that, and then across that row I would conditionally format it to where like if it's higher rank, so like closer to 1, it'll be green, and if it drops, it'll be closer to red. And so then I could spot like over time, how has this keyword ranked in terms of the most frequently ranked terms on Amazon. I can very easily see that drop or that change in trend where it goes from green to red on a certain week or a certain month. And then we can tie that back to different trends that we're seeing across category performance within our catalog or different things like that. So
Yeah.
conditional formatting is great. But what I was going to say was you can do a lot of formulas for conditional formatting where you can say like, and we use this in like, we have a budget pacing doc where we're looking at the performance on a daily basis across all clients and accounts, and if ROAS or ACOS it fluctuates too high or too low within a particular range, you can have it highlight the cell a different color. So I think for us, like if we're in a particular range that's good for us that we've decided is within our comfort level, it'll keep it green. But if it falls outside of that, it might turn it yellow, and if it falls too far out, it might label it red. And so again, it's just like a visual cue, a visual tool that allows you to quickly look at Excel sheet and be able to extrapolate and extract some data and information from that sheet that tells you a better story without having to really inspect it too much. You can just kind of quickly look at the colors and get a good idea of what it's telling you.
Yeah. And that's again using that if logic as well. So you'll see, saying if it's above this or below this, then color it this way. So all of these things that we're talking about today, they're all interrelated. And if you can learn to use these 7 items all together, you're going to greatly see your workflow is going to be faster. Your reporting is going to be more in depth for your clients. It'll certainly be extremely valuable. I guess I will just add one more thing to here, and then we'll kind of move on. But I think I just want to reiterate what you said, Andrew, about seeing those trends. And so let's just say someone downloaded like a daily performance chart, and then they can use a pivot table to kind of turn those days into weeks or turn those days into day of week if they want to see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever. And if you then, pivot table all that out, and now you're seeing performance by week or by day of week. And if you just want to if you're just being like, okay, when's the best conversion? Like what day of the week is the best conversion? If you just filter or like sort by like highest converting day to lowest converting day, you're going to rearrange all the days of the week. And that's going to be like, it's like, okay, the best performing day is Friday, and the second best performing day is like Monday or something. And you'll, it's not super legible, but if you kept it in the original day of the week order and you just applied that color scale, what you would probably see is there's a trend where things dip into a lower conversion rate in the middle of the week, and then things trend like they dips into the red around Wednesday and then slowly gravitates towards green going into the weekend or something like that. And so, that's where these can come in really handy for identifying trends like that. Or same thing if you're looking at like the past 12 months and you just want to see like the trends across all those different months. When do conversion rates start ramping up versus ramping down? Those color scales are going to help kind of show that smoother effect rather than just sorting your months by highest conversion rate or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of different use cases for conditional formatting. It's a great tool, very good visual tool. And this last number 7 is also a tool that we use visually. That is a visual tool, not necessarily a formula, and that is creating charts. So let's dive into that. So charts are a great tool within Excel. The main thing that I use charts for is just to be able, obviously, visually be able to see data over time or compare data sets over time. I use charts all the time. I can look at how my spend and sales are correlated to one another. I can see how my ad sales are having an impact on my total sales. I can chart a variety of different things. There's so many different variables and options that you can execute against for charts in Excel that we could spend another hour, 2 hours, 3 hours just going over. Oh, we could create this type of chart or this type of chart or that type of visual for showing various types of data. But the main point is that you're able to utilize charts. You're able to take a set of data, a data sheet, and extract out using the different tools that we've already mentioned, extract out the data that you need, and then visually be able to display that in a way that a client or your boss or whoever is able to interpret that data in a very concise and quick manner. So, for example, if like you wanted to show just the change in spend on a prime week, or you wanted to show just an increase on a particular day in click-through rate or spend or conversion, whatever, you would, chart out the date and the change in each individual day. You would have the conversion rate or the spend, and you'd be able to see that trend in a line chart. But there's a ton of other different charts you can create as well. You can create line charts, pie charts, scatter plots. You can do a whole plethora of charts to display data. And we can maybe break down some of the different ways we utilize each of them, or, we can just kind of breeze through this one and just trust that people understand the use case of charts in telling a story, data storytelling.
This will certainly need a much another episode dedicated to itself. But yeah, I mean, I use pie charts for showing spend splits across brand, non-brand, competitors, product targeting, all that kind of stuff. Scatter plots, you know me, Andrew, I love scatter plots for the linear regression tool that's built into both Google Sheets and Excel. But the linear regression tool, basically just, you have your scatter plot, your x-axis is maybe just like your total traffic and your y-axis is total sales. And it's just gonna, you download your daily data, it scatters it across the chart, and then it'll draw a line that's like the best fit trend line across all those items. And you can kind of see that visual slope. And then it will also assign a correlation, an R squared, that lets you kind of get an idea of what's the strength of the correlation. We've used that. We've recently realized there's a much better way to do it that we started doing. But I mean, we've used that in the past to look at the non-brand sales or non-brand spend impact on like total sales. So just lots of really interesting things you could do there. We'll have to do a separate video because there's just way too much stuff here. But explore the charts, I guess, right? You can do bar graphs.
Use the charts. I mean, the charts can get super complicated, and there's like a whole like other layer of level we could get to. But yeah, spend some time looking at the charts, seeing what you can do.
Also, like how do you make the scales on these? Like you can have multiple axes. You can do
that's what I was going to get into.
Logarithmic axes. Okay,
yeah. I was going to get into like there's so much like little details within setting up charts that like would help create the visual that you're actually going for. Like sometimes you need to change how like do you want everything on one axis, or do you want it on two separate axes? Do you need it on a third? Do you need three? Do you need three axes? Do you need to scale the axis at a different level? So like maybe instead of going by like $1,000 increments, you need it to jump by like $10,000 increments. So that way you can see, bigger trend shifts in trend or whatever. Just overall make the chart look better, more appealing. Those types of things. Like, are you able to do that? Are you able to take a full data set and cut it out, make it look how you want it to look, change the colors, change the format, change the text, all that type of stuff, add different elements like legends and titles and chart axis titles. And are you able to do all that type of stuff and able to format those charts in a way that makes them look good and displays the data that you want to display in a way that tells a story in a way that you want to tell it? So that type of stuff is really important for Amazon PPC, and especially for the reporting piece of running Amazon ads, is you got to know how to use charts. You got to know how to build those out and display them in a way that works well. Yeah.
So stay tuned for, some video series on YouTube where I'm not sure if we'll be able to get to all of these, but certainly taking out some of the most popular ones. So yeah, if you guys want us to cover any of these in particular, leave a comment and we'll make sure that we don't leave that out. We'll probably grab like 3 of these or so and do some extra videos on YouTube. So yeah, subscribe so you don't miss it. Leave a comment on this video of which ones you want to make sure we cover, and we'll be back next time. Andrew, send us out.
All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in to That Amazon Ads Podcast. We will see you on the next episode.